Okay, one thing I need to remember to do is I need to clap because that way I can sing.
Audio and visual sync. It's why they have those slapper things that they
Yep.
do in movies.
Oh, you have yours, I have mine.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna clap. I'm gonna clap and then hold for like 3 seconds because I also want to get the background noise. It makes it easier for editing. I've been forgetting to do that too.
Final Fantasy sure has come a long way, hasn't it?
I
I never said it was a direction we liked. I just said it's changed a lot. I mean,
Well, good on it though for trying to change, right? And not be
Yeah.
the exact same thing every time it comes out. Well, let's try making it an MMO. Let's see what happens when we keep people in the same area for 60 hours and then open it up right at the end. Let's see how that works.
yeah. I mean, I will keep going back and playing 6 because I liked 6, and because it's the 6, otherwise known as 3, otherwise known as. Actually, I'm not going down that path. Never mind. But it's always been an interesting genre, just everything coming out of Japan. Or at least in that particular department. We've got that, we've got NIS Soft, we've got an entire genre out there which is separated from everything else, even other things that are a lot like it. You know, it's not an RPG, it is a JRPG.
That brings us to today's episode. Just make sure it's the right way up. Yeah. JRPGs and the Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Well, it's got the arrow.
Yeah, I know, but I've been following the arrow, okay?
Mm.
Now, you might be wondering, what's a Technicolor Dreamcoat? Well, you didn't get that joke, and if you did, you would know that that joke was meta.
Thanks to Meta, we know that that joke was meta.
By the way, Staples, if you're interested in a sponsorship, we could totally use more chalkboards.
Yeah, we don't really want to talk about what happened to that one. It's very long story.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about why there's a hole in it.
But JRPGs unto itself is a very weird thing to call a genre because that's really the only thing that we call that particular type of game coming out of Japan. You've never heard of a JRPG or
Real-time strategy. JRPGs.
Japanese real-time strategy or a Japanese first-person shooter or a Japanese cover-based shooter or anything like that. But for some reason, the RPGs get the title of this game from Japan. It has the seal of approval from, well, some reviewers would have you believe Pedo Bear, but let's not go down that territory. And it really is because RPGs, more so than any other game genre, really embody a story and people and a culture and something you actually get involved in. And because of that, the differences between the Japanese culture and the Canadian culture, or the
Western culture, I would say.
Yeah, I was about to make an American joke. Thank you for saving me.
Yeah, just remember there is a bit of an oxymoron to the word Canadian culture, but go on.
It shows more. I think the only shooting game I can really think of that came out of Japan recently, like I'm sure there's lots of them. I'm sure the comment thread's going to swarm me with them. I'm sure by the time this episode.
I remember that there are tons of games in Japan that don't get brought over to the United States because they're just not sure that they'll take off.
Yeah, not to mention every time they do those massive crossover games, they can't get them over here because of all the rights and everyone now owns different things. But the last one I can really think of was Vanquish, and that one was very distinctive against the idea of any other shooting game to come out of, I guess, American studios. Cover system? Yeah, we got a cover system, but this thing's got heat-seeking missiles. You might want to actually get out of it. Don't worry, though. You got a fucking jet slide and slow-mo powers. Take that, Gears of War!
But it's funny, I mean, you bring all that up because I'm also thinking about the way the Japanese make their cartoons. They're not even really called cartoons. It's called anime. When they make comics, it's not called comics. It's called manga.
Well, I think the comics manga is just mainly the format. Like a comic is pretty thin. It's got ads in it from most companies, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, Top Cow, for not putting ads in there.
That certainly ties into the business strategy, but it still doesn't change the fact that it's two ways of conveying visual and text information on a sheet of paper.
Yeah.
From there, then it changes depending on the culture.
Yeah, the manga has a lot more going on in it, but it's black and white, and it's designed kind of serially, so it can be released in Shonen Jump and magazines like that, where comic books are just, here's your whatever few things of flimsy paper together, give me $5.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, the content to money ratio of manga versus comic books isn't even a competition.
So what state would you say that JRPGs are right now in the gaming industry? Because I wouldn't say that they're the most popular. I feel like they were at their most popular, especially during the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 eras. Final Fantasy VII was a huge deal.
Yes, can we all get over it, please?
Well, still, I mean, as far as like how much impact one game can make, Final Fantasy was that game, and I think a lot of that came from just how well the PlayStation was able to render those CGI cutscenes, and you can see the characters, and it's in these beautiful environments. And well, you got to the game, and it didn't quite look half that, but it still looked
The
incredible.
game was made out of cardboard boxes and hair gel. Lots and lots and lots of industrial hair
and lots of combat boots.
Lots of combat boots are effective though.
Well, yeah. And what other kind of boots would you wear? Seriously.
Awesome. Yeah.
Construction boots. Maybe steel-toed boots gives you a little bit of an extra edge to your kick, but then you have to be a kick-based class, like a kickboxer or.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that party. The police are still after me for it.
Mm.
In terms of the state, though, a lot of comments I've seen about JRPGs lately comes from a general lack of choice. When you look at some of the Western RPGs, the Fallout series, Oblivion series, those kind of things, it really emphasizes an open world. And whenever you think of RPGs coming over from the Americas, you think of this open world now because that's just synonymous. JRPGs, mostly now, as they once did when they first existed, have a story, have a set. Here are the characters, here are their names, here are their personalities, and they are going on a story. And yes, there's some side quests, and there's some optional cutscenes that you only get if you get a relationship bar with a certain person.
And there's at least one opportunity to delve into each of the characters' stories a little bit.
Yeah. But generally speaking, you're following a story, whereas if you look at what the Western RPGs typically considered, again, Oblivion being the big example, or Elder Scrolls, being the big example, it's open world. It's go where you want, do whatever you want, as long as you're in this municipality. And that's kind of the general attitude. A lot of people have really fallen in love with the open world mechanic.
It's funny you say municipality because you'll get to the edge of the Skyrim province, and the game is like, really? There's not enough for you to do. You need to go to another area. Did you explore all of Skyrim? Did you download all the mods? No? Okay. So why don't you turn back right now? Go. Come. No. The MMO's on its way. It's on its way.
Oh yeah. But a lot of people again they're desiring the open world aspect, the freedom to go where you want, go where you choose. Whereas
it's funny because when you think of just like American culture versus Japanese culture, what is America's like number one quality that they seek? It's freedom.
Guns.
It's the freedom to have guns. Everything comes back. Freedom of being able to choose like what business you want to do. Freedom of profession. Freedom to shoot things, provided you can justify it or whatever. But then if you look at Japanese culture, there is a sense of responsibility, a sense of duty. So these characters aren't going to exist in the open world because they almost always have something important for them to do, namely save the world from utter destruction. Which is as much of an exaggeration or as much of a fantasy as somebody in Japan playing that game could possibly want. And what could you want more than to have the ultimate responsibility, which is to save the entire world from destruction?
You'll save the world again, right here from my own den. That actually made me feel really old.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I saw the flash for it.
Yes, but I feel old anyways. But anyways, to finish that point, this is the same thing that books and movies do. So I don't understand why, again, there's probably a lot of people who don't mind, but a lot of people out there have complained about JRPG's lack of open worldness or go where you wantness. When technically following a story is what movies do, it's what books do, it's what pretty much every other form of entertainment. And it's not as though there isn't free, even when you go back to basic the early Final Fantasy games. There's lots of points where, okay, I beat this boss, did this thing, now I backtrack, do this little thing, get a little bit extra story, go to this temple, chisel out one of the legendary weapons. I now have another legendary weapon. I go out and I do that kind of stuff. Like, there's lots of room to discover things, go your own direction, and find that one stupid dagger that seems to just override your ability to do anything every single turn and sometimes heal your enemies. But there's definitely some freedom there. If you look at Tales of Symphonia, which I think once everybody got over their boner for Final Fantasy VII, realized was another great JRPG, has a lot of freedom.
That was like a 6-year boner. And Tales of Symphonia was a GameCube release.
Yeah, and it's been re-released several times.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so your precious Final Fantasy VII is still sitting in your PS1, but Tales of Symphonia got released several more times and got a quasi-sequel and now an HD remake. I'm not quite sure where the hell I was going. I guess I just like kicking people when they're down. So, okay, but beyond the open worldness, you've just got people, as you said, the whole responsibility thing. They've got a reason for being here. It isn't I will get back to the story when I want to. It is something is crashing down from space and you have to go there now, even though they don't actually give you a timer for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can give a player that sense of urgency, but not actually physically put a time limit on that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But when it just in terms of structuring the game, when a JRPG knows the course of the story and it knows all the events, and it's not expecting the player to sort of narrate himself, the actual game itself can be played so much better. I mean, whether it's Chrono Trigger or Tales of Symphonia, or yes, I think it's pertinent to bring up Bravely Default in this situation.
Yeah.
They give you things to do so that you're never under leveled when you face the next challenge. Some of them tie into a subplot, some of them are just this cave that you want to explore to go find something. But you never feel like you're grinding. You always feel like you're working towards at least some goal, even if it's not the major goal. And that's one of the problems with this open world setting, because you'll get to a situation that is planned for you to come to later on, but because the game didn't actually restrict you in any way, it either has to do one of two things. Either A, kick the ever-loving crap out of you and force you to go grind, which should never happen in an RPG. Grinding is the result of either a player wanting to get more powerful than the way the game wants him to be, or the player just got to the wrong place and refuses to go do something else. Whatever. B, would do what Skyrim did, which was level the game as you were playing, so no matter where you went, you were always going to be actively challenged, but neither greatly or under challenged. It was always you versus exactly the level that you are.
Yeah, but that did lead to some situations where the RNG god declared you were going to fight a dragon now, and then it gets killed by a passing bear.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but when a dragon gets killed by a bear, I feel like a certain level of majesty has been lost. Like, oh, here, enjoy your power word. Did you actually do anything to earn it? I do agree with the grinding thing. I mean, the problem with open world RPGs is that the game has to always be calculated for you decide to go off the beaten path and grind.
Yeah.
Therefore, the challenge scale has to be you were always going off the beaten path to grind. So occasionally you'll do a story thing and think, oh, wow, I want to actually find out what happens to this character. Immediately go to the next one and have a giant hand come out and slap you across the face for, nope, sorry, you don't have the right gear, you don't have the right stuff. And there is a lot of... I think the one I'm thinking of the most, and this might be pushing the whole idea of an open world RPG a bit, would probably be Borderlands. Okay. Because the difficulty curve in that game always pissed me off. The first one was worse. The second one did a little bit better, but as you go...
I think I forgot to close the window.
But, as you go up the difficulty curve, it keeps thinking that you have all these fantastic things. Like, I'm on the highest difficulty, and I don't really feel challenged, because enemies are pretty much one-hitting me and soaking up insane amounts of damage. Like, this isn't challenge, this is masochism. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of what the game is doing is basically putting aside, like, hey, how are all those oranges? Oranges? Yes, oranges. The rare stuff. No, I don't have any rare. I've got a bunch of purples. Oh, what about pearlescents? Oh, well, I have, my friend gave me this pearlescent sniper rifle. Fantastic! Here, my weak spot's right here on the end of this tentacle. Have fun! Yeah, maybe that's just Borderlands hates snipers.
What is it that it's Destiny that is big on people's minds right now? Because people were expecting that this one game was going to encompass so much content and so much choice that it would feel like it was going to be something that you can be involved in for a long time. And what the players are realizing is that, well, there is some substantial content and the game itself is designed quite well. It's not even close to the amount of content that I think people were expecting. And the amount of content that is there is kind of repetitive. It's you run through an environment, you shoot everything that's shooting at you, and then you get some loot, and then you rinse and repeat until, I don't know.
But I think another major problem people have countered for that is it's always online, I mean, gods, we remember we hate this, right? Can we go back to the fact that we're all supposed to be against the always online thing? That's
Do you
why we
think at a certain point we're gonna realize we were wrong and end up liking it? Because I feel like that's possible. You know, when someone's gonna change something, and then there's the initial resistance to it, and then eventually we give in. Are we being conditioned to like something that we know we shouldn't like? Oh my
I think we're
god.
getting a little deep for this episode. I mean, we are talking about JRPGs here, girls with technicolored hair.
Right. Meta.
Right. Well, I think the problem was here's a game with a nice cooperative feature, but you have to be always online if you're playing by yourself. This has resulted in the developers of the game actually going in and fixing several things that players were not really exploiting. Like, I don't know if you remember during Dead Space 3, they discovered this one area that apparently the resources just kept respawning.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of paying for extra resources to EA, you could just keep farming this room again and again and again. And considering the backlash for the you can just buy resources to build your perfect gun, EA was, oh yeah, that's fine, that's perfectly fine. We want to do it that way. That's great. Please stop hanging us. We were running out of executives to fire.
Mm-hmm.
And Destiny has been really on top of every time someone discovers a loot cave that has a short respawn timer or something like that, you can get all these resources. So they're actively rebuilding the game every time people discover, hey, this is an annoying feature. This is how we get around this feature. Oh no, that's not how we want to play the game. Gone.
Yeah, it's just discouraging whenever a player is more focused on where they're going to get their next loot fix than actually just enjoying the game for what it is.
Yeah, and like it, and well, the multiplayer even though you can cooperative all the time, the best way apparently to get experience is to do versus mode. In fact, most of the fun that comes from versus mode, but they want you to pay a membership for that. So it's I don't know why people aren't just calling Destiny an MMO at this point. It's open world cooperative, and you pay a monthly fee to do the most interesting feature in it. So let's call it an MMO. That's exactly what it is. But anyways, we're supposed to be talking about JRPGs, and we sort of got off and bashed Destiny a bit.
Because we sort of don't ever do anything like that, right?
Absolutely.
No,
I mean,
never, not once.
To put "but I digress" on my T-shirt would be an exaggeration of the 11th degree. But so RPGs are more about a world, about a culture, about background and people interacting with each other. And this is really where culture comes in. The Americans' culture versus the Japanese one of honor, of responsibility, of actually wanting to do something. And it seems that there's always a lot of JRPGs, there's this character development, which, admittedly at this point, I think later in my life kind of turns me off a bit. But when I was younger, I think I appreciated it a bit more. You always have this 14-year-old character or 16 or a really young person discovering who they are, going through this character arc where they must become more self-reliant, become stronger, become a different person, and then by the end of it, they're somebody who can save the world or somebody who can do something like that, even though they're still technically a child. And that can start annoying people because you always start off as somebody, in some cases, who's completely unlikable or at least difficult to like.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, again, you go back to American RPGs, and most of the time you've got a character who's been through wars or something, like someone who has a bit of background to them, and then spontaneously they're going through.
Yeah, and it's a matter of them pushing themselves further and further in order to achieve the goal, and it puts a greater strain on them. It can be somewhat deflating when your character is destined to be great and powerful, and all he has to do is just receive the power. So what I'm interested about JRPGs is, if you look at the way Final Fantasy has kind of evolved, especially in the last few iterations.
I'm surprised you didn't use air quotes for that.
There seems to be a dislike for the style. It gets more and more teen J-poppy with the characters that are, for all intents and purposes, more realistic than they used to be. It used to be more like chibi, cute, cartoony style, and just they get more and more mature. But what I noticed about these RPGs is that in a lot of ways, the advancements in game design has actually hurt them more than it's helped them. And I want to use Final Fantasy as kind of my original example of this, Final Fantasy 1 entertainment system. So think of the way you would play a Western RPG around that time. Maybe it was Dungeons and Dragons, and maybe it was one of the earlier RPGs on some of the older consoles before the NES. And the end was always to you. Like, you walk into the cave and you have a look around and you notice that it's dingy and there's not much light, and you hear the telltale creaking of a skeleton that's perhaps quite old and his bones are all disjointed or whatever. And I'm a great dungeon master, by the way. Really, I am. Um, and it's about you projecting yourself into the environment. So you're filling in the details of the character that don't exist, and even today, it's Western RPGs continue to succeed doing that, like in Skyrim, because those mechanics are not difficult to replicate. You just have to be the nameless person projecting yourself into the character. Like you can be whatever you want in Skyrim, and it doesn't matter because as long as your actions are what drives the story, then it doesn't matter what the character is, whether he's lizard face or cat face or red face or whatever. But in an RPG, in a JRPG, um, when I was playing the original Final Fantasy, there was only so much information they can convey without overheating the NES and causing an explosion.
Yeah, text files weren't exactly compressible back then.
Yeah. So what that meant was they actually had to use a lot of text and a lot of numbers in order to convey what was supposed to be happening in the story. Like you, there in Final Fantasy, you get to this dock town or port town or water town, whatever. They weren't complicated townships, and you talk to this pirate, and the pirate's like, "Ah, shiver me timbers, I'm gonna kill you." And then you get into a fight with 9 pirates. Now, if this were like a TV show like Sinbad, where back in the 90s it was like 3 people fighting a group of 20, you at least got to watch it. But in this, you didn't. It's just telling you the course of the fight. The fighter attacked the pirate died. The pirates respond with attacking, and it's telling you all of this. So what you actually have to do is use this thing called abstraction, where you have to picture in your mind the details of the incident based off the information. It's the same thing as reading a comic book. It's giving you the visuals, and it's telling you what happened, it's showing you what happened, but the details are pretty much up to you.
It's also, I think, comparable to a book. Like, I've had books
absolutely.
go on for paragraph after paragraph describing tiny thoughts, emotions, things are going on, and you, as a person, basically are absorbing these details, knowing that as you read them, no time is technically passing by in the world of the book.
Absolutely.
In fact, something I've been reading a couple of things from the Black Library, Warhammer 40k for people who don't know, and one of the things to talk about is the priests of Mars will communicate in binary. So this, like, they'll have short conversations in binary, and you mentally have to understand that what he just said took him a third of a second. This entire, 3 sentences, because he's speaking in binary, took him, again, 0.35 of a second. And you can't really convey that in even a video game or a movie or anything like that. You can only really convey that in your head, because how else do you get all this information without any time passing by in the real world? It's theater of the mind, something that I think we really lost a lot of the moment we stopped doing radio plays.
On the far end with radio and with books, those are pure abstraction. Unless they have pictures in it, which most adult novels don't, you have to imagine everything. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have movies and television shows, which is pure projection. Because you don't even get to make a decision. You have to relate to the characters and always accept the decisions that they make and think, well, how would I have made that decision? And if you relate to the character, you're going to find a way to justify it. It's kind of the fun in a lot of TV shows when characters are making difficult decisions, and you kind of want to know, are they going to do this or are they going to do that?
That was a horrible decision you just made, but you know what? If I was in the zombie apocalypse, maybe I would have made the same call. I do have the, comfort of just being here on this slightly uncomfortable couch.
Yeah. I mean, I feel bad for people who just complain about characters making dumb choices. Well, I don't know if you live in the real world, but in the real world, I make dumb choices all the goddamn time. I once thought I was walking through a sliding door, and it wasn't a door, it was just glass. It really hurt my head. Like, it really hurt. Like, right here. I like that. People are just dumb. It happens. So getting back to the game design, though. So why did it work in Final Fantasy? Well, it was because even though there was limited information, it still allowed you as a player to fill in details, and then you actually got more attached to it. And it was okay because it wasn't addressing you, it was addressing your heroes. So your heroes all represent facets of you as a player, whether you wanted to build a team that was strictly going to get through the game as as best as possible, or you just wanted to pick your favorite characters, or if you were somebody who named your characters after people you knew in real life because you wanted you and your friends to go on an adventure, which is the cutest possibility.
Don't do that in FTL.
Uh, or Fire Emblem. But you look at the way like Final Fantasy behaves now, and it's become more of a cinematic experience. And because there is no information for the player to really fill in, then there's less attachment to it, and you're essentially watching something that you occasionally get to interact in. Um, with Bravely Default, what they did was they didn't deny that this was a game, and they weren't pretending like this was a story that you were imagining happening. They were totally on board with the fact that characters are standing still, waiting turns to attack each other, which in actual context would be hilarious if that were the case, but it's not. All right, it's your turn. Come at me. Come on. Or like in Final Fantasy 1, if you like targeted one creature with two of your heroes, and one of the heroes killed it, the other hero would attack space, and it would say ineffective.
Really?
Because it didn't realign to another enemy. So you had to picture a guy running up to blank space, stabbing nothing, walking back to his side, and like, what the hell was that? You're our main source of damage. You're supposed to attack somebody. Yeah, so I just think that's where JRPGs are faltering, is because they're trying so hard to immerse you in the spectacle, but if the player can't imagine any of the things on his own, then he's going to not get as much of an experience out of it.
It's always why I thought that, especially the PS Vita and the portable systems in general, always seem to be a better conduit for JRPGs, because they can be expansive, they can take a while to do, and they don't really require the pretty graphics or the cutscenes that shooters seem to think they need to put in, or the good set. Yeah, and as you said, it's the whole theater of the mind thing that these older games tapped into. The fact that you have somebody go up father, it's actually me. No, it is a dog I've been stabbed. And it's like, to watch it is, you're either laughing at it because it's silly, or in your mind, the girl was actually stabbed and tears in her eyes. Like, it attaches you to it, because there's nothing for you. Like, you were given threads and you was put together. Like, a lot of older RPGs, when I'm playing them, I'm rewriting a lot of sentences in my head. Like, not for completely different scenarios, but just changing how the words work, make the sentences a little longer, or shortening ones here. Like, my brain's constantly doing this because, in some cases the translations were bad, but it's just a matter that it's acting differently. It's doing some. It's it's actually interacting with me inside my head. It's all being pictured inside my head, and yeah, some of these people talk a little differently in my head because that's just how they should be talking, in my opinion. But when you have perfectly formulated sentences and people with the exaggerated gestures and the jazz hands and all that other stuff, like, you're again following someone else's story, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's not what really brought us into them, so many years ago.
Yeah, and when you're trying to at least make sure that the gameplay is good, well, that's another problem. It's not just the storytelling that's faltering, it's the gameplay that's faltering. Because again, a lot of these mechanics in original RPGs, like with gaining experience or with calculating damage, were only used as variables to make up for the fact that you couldn't actually quantify how much damage somebody does without doing any math. And you couldn't quantify a character's experience in any other way other than just giving him an arbitrary pool of numbers and saying, once you collected this amount of experience, you gain this level. The idea of a level is, for an RPG character standpoint, is to reflect how far they've come as characters. Well, a level 10 is clearly more powerful than a level 1 because he's more experienced, he's more skilled in combat, he understands more nuance, and the more levels he gets, the more effective that character becomes. But now, because the level system hasn't evolved, what you're seeing now is that the levels really just act as an obstruction. Well, I can't go to this level 50 area unless I'm level 50, but I'm level 45, and that tarantula over there is just a different color. It's not like I've not fought the tarantula before. So why am I being restricted other than numbers? I don't feel like this reflects my character.
I also think that in addition to the dependence on leveling, we also have a huge dependence on loot. I mean, that is one of the biggest problems in Destiny. That's why people are trying to find loot farm exploits.
Yeah, I mean,
That's,
some games like Borderlands embrace the loot as part of the appeal because finding items that shotgun, like rapid fire shotguns, are appealing, I guess. But
well, yeah, I remember part of the thing. One of the sentences that got me really into Borderlands 1 was part of a preview and said, "Dear Diary, today I found a handgun that shoots shotgun rounds that light people on fire." Okay, this sounds like a fun game. But I think it also matter in that the dependence on loot becomes way too much. I mean, you can have a class mod that gives you the bonuses to the skills you want, but 10 levels later, you haven't switched out that class mod because you haven't found the one that gives you the same bonuses. In the meantime, you know you're not doing as much damage as you should be. You know your weapons aren't that effective. I also think, like, if you're going to make a game focused on loot, don't do the golden chest. The golden Borderlands 2 had a golden chest in the middle of the main hub town. You could use a golden key on the golden chest, and it would give you random level matched purple gear. Purple, by the way, being one lowest from the rarest drop thing, and pearlescence being that you have to beat the raid bosses to get the crystals to buy them. But you could follow Borderland or Gearbox rather on Twitter, and they would keep giving you codes that you could then put into the game that would give you more golden keys. So a game that's very loot friendly and loot dependent and all that stuff, all of a sudden is defeated by hoarding golden keys, going to the chest, using. Okay,
yeah,
3 keys later, I've got a good sniper rifle and a nice class mod.
yeah, and you know, and this isn't just with the JRPGs, but you notice that loot is often used in the place of leveling once you get to max level. Like in World of Warcraft, in order to keep up with the raids of your guild, you had to have a certain tier of gear. So if you couldn't go to do this raid unless you had tier 2 gear. Tier 2 gear might as well have been another 10 levels for the amount of time that you have to invest into making your character more powerful. So it was basically the same thing, and the loot was the goal and not just a means to achieve your goal.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have done this particular comparison, but the way RPGs and even games in general handle themselves is very culturally different. The Americans have the general idea of the gun, and again, I can use Borderlands as a fantastic example for that because, hey, here's this gun. Here's a slightly better version of this gun. It was a little less accurate, but still the numbers are better. So, yay, new gun. You're constantly swapping out your gear unless you're spamming the golden keys in the main chest. We look at a game like Tales to Symphonia. I'm using that one a lot. Good game. You look at Tales to Symphonia, and you can be going through a dungeon, and you found a new sword that's stronger than your old one, but this one's got kind of the same element as the people in this dungeon. So there's really not a lot of point to using it because they're going to be resistant. Mm-hmm. Or you can even have gear that is several levels below you, but because it has some kind of additional feature or something, you're keeping it in your backpack because you know there's going to be a situation where, okay, we're facing the tree people or the whatever things. Well, I've got this fire sword. It's 10 levels below me, but because it's fire and there are trees, it is now effective again. And that I think a lot of people played those games, had sort of extra gear here and there, and were constantly tweaking, and here's this new thing. Like, it's a matter of the culture of the sword versus the culture of the gun. The gun is a tool. The sword is an extension of yourself. So JRPGs in general have a lot of idea that their loot is really only an extension of you as the player or as for what you want to do.
You see a lot less randomized loot in JRPGs too.
Oh yeah, and many of them have stories behind it. Like you can pick it up and like here's this tiny little giblet of lore explaining what happened to it, how it got there, or it'll just say a nice sturdy sword, or once used by this thing, part of a statue that broke apart. The sword was then later handed down by many generations, used part of it. Like everything's got a bit of a story to it, and I feel like JRPGs in general usually do a bit more effort towards that.
Yeah, and they also make more effort to truly make these things feel like games. And I notice that you don't see a overworld very much in Western RPGs, but what the overworld is when your character would sort of shrink down to like 1/8 their size and then walk around a map representing the entirety of the world. And what's great is that you feel the progress you're making overall in the game based off how easy it is for you to traverse the overworld. At first, when you're just in the early levels, you can walk around maybe your area. You go from town to that first cave, where when you come back and find out your town is on fire, kind of thing. But as you grow and as you gain levels, and the restrictions are being lifted, and eventually you get a ship that can fly everywhere. So
Yep.
now the entire world gives you that same sense of exploration that the first initial area did, because your ability to understand it has grown and grown and grown, but there is still a max. There is still borders and edges. And so it ends up feeling like this gigantic board game where every piece ties in some way. And yes, there is the roll of the dice, but based off using your probability and being strategic, you can overcome most of this. And if you absolutely positively have to, gain a few extra levels, come back a little stronger. But when you see in Western RPGs, and I want to use Diablo as an example of this.
Fast travel.
The story was just a means in Diablo 3. The story was just a means to get to the adventure mode, where now you're just hunting loot and just seeing who can hunt the most amount of loot the most effectively. And because so much of the game design is based off randomization, your immersion is not the same thing you'll get as you get in a JRPG. Not even close.
Yeah, you open up a chest and the RNG god doth decree that that you get this nice broadsword, or you open up a chest and declares, well, here's this elvish sword that was originally part of a set gifted to the human king as part of a peace treaty 300 years ago. It's a bit rusty, but it's still got a nice bit of kick to it. Even if it's functionally the same as the broadsword in the other game, it feels like it has something. It feels like it's actually part of the world and not just a role of the one-armed bandit.
Yeah. And when you get into class design as well, this changes from RPG to RPG. Like in a lot of the later Final Fantasies, if they didn't have a job system, you're basically stuck with whatever class your hero was. But I love it when they do the job system, because assuming the developers aren't secretly making up their own tier list of what jobs are best and what jobs are worst, you could build your team out of the jobs you want, and you could make it viable. You'd have to be trying to make it not work. Like, you would have to have 4 white mages and deal no damage whatsoever and just try to win through attrition. You can do it. You probably shouldn't do it, but you can do it. I don't feel like the job systems in, say, Skyrim really mean as much. I mean, in Skyrim, you didn't even really have a job. You just had things you got good at.
Yeah.
So your character felt more dimensional, and it felt more like you had different facets to the person, and it does improve your character's story, because you get really into blacksmithing, you go see where blacksmithing takes you. You get really into the thieves guild, you see where thieving can take you, and that adds to your character's definition, and you know a little bit more about yourself, because you know how much or how little you actually do. If you're somebody who does every single thing in Skyrim, and you're essentially the most powerful demigod in all of Skyrim's history, well, that says that you're a bit power hungry and you just want to do everything.
I don't think you're really a demigod until you get the DLC that lets you ride dragons.
That does kind of change the nature of the game a little bit.
Yeah, but actually, as a bit of a rebuttal to your last point, I actually like it when games say, here are your characters, here's what they do. Like, here's the one character who in cutscenes is snarky and all self-important and all that stuff. And in fights, he is a wizard. He breaks out the staff. He does abilities that basically reflect his personality. Because he's an intelligent person and he knows he's intelligent and he wants to prove to everyone he's intelligent, he went to the school of wizardry. He became a wizard. He now does wizardly things. It fits who he is. And the same thing if you have a rogue in the party, or not a literal rogue, like someone who just doesn't play, who plays by their own rules, a bit of a bar brawler and all that stuff. Well, when he's in combat or when he's actually functioning, he gets bonuses for not using a weapon. He has abilities that maybe hurt himself, but also hurt the enemy. Like, the way they behave, their class reflects who they are as a person. Like, their personality and, again, who they are as a person becomes what represents them, instead of just switching around to different class. Like, oh, you're the bar brawler? Yeah, here's your wand. You're now magic specialist.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And it's a great way of marrying both storytelling and game design properly, because the more you develop the character, the more it improves their ability in the game. So I totally get that for sure.
I think the biggest hurdle that JRPGs are facing now versus before has to do, I think, with a bit more immersion of the anime culture into JRPGs. It has to do with the okay, why am I beating around the bush? It has to do with the over-sexualized young girls.
Here we go.
I'm a fan of NIS games, but even I will admit to kind of mentally buzzing over every time they do some kind of scene where, but you've been injured, I need to bandage. Like, no, don't take off my clothes. And like, it's all that's like, there is a lot of face palming going around. Like, some of it's funny, some of it's cute, and some of it is okay. Can we please skip this before someone comes through my room? And I'm not quite sure why it's embracing that wholeheartedly. It seems like Japan in general is doing that. I saw some screens from the latest Fatal Frame game, and why the heck they're in lingerie that doesn't fully cover their butt crack, I don't know.
I don't claim to be a Japanese person, and my understanding of their culture is limited only to what I can extrapolate from what I read.
We're not weeaboos.
Yeah, but I just think in general they're much more reserved and much more shy, and they don't really get very many opportunities to have these open dialogues about sexuality. And I think when that happens in these stories, it kind of reflects that, because they don't really want to get undressed, but they end up being undressed, and some of them just don't even care. They just go along with it. Like they're not even aware of their own sexuality, to the point where they'll fight in a bikini and a sword and a shield, and that's it, and not even think about it.
Well, I remember the over-sexualized young girls, actually something a lot of people said about the Hyper Dimension Neptuna series when it started. And I played and I thought it was in many ways hilarious, because the whole idea is, well, the whole underlining idea, not the main, but the whole underlying idea is basically just a personification of the console wars. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's essentially what it. And there was a lot of interesting, I'm not even quite sure, intentional satire, but there also was, a lot of funny moments, a lot of interesting little quirks, a lot of, I don't even say references. Like, it's kind of like referencing the meta that's formed out of the meta. Like, it was very interestingly done. And unfortunately, as the thing kind of went on, and then there was an anime for it, et cetera, they all kind of threw that aside for the sake of, how many wardrobe malfunctions can we create. But a ton of people just looked at it, declared over-sexualized young girls, low rating. And it's like, did you try the combat? The combat's, once you get the flow of it, it's pretty interesting. The customization. Again, NIS Soft is pretty much a very big perpetrator of this. They have that. They have the Altair Saga. They've got a bunch of stuff in there. One of the particular Alchemist games had a main character whose skirt was partially transparent, so you could actually see her panties. And I never actually played that one, but I was pretty damn sure at some point, guy was gonna get knocked over. Like, eek, perverts! Like, you're not. Your skirt is partially transparent, so it's hard to.
Don't wear a transparent skirt if you don't want people to look. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so it's hard to blame people for making those judgments, but at the same time. Well, okay, the best example, Spartacus. Spartacus is a TV show. It has plenty of nudity, a lot of male nudity, actually, but it's got nudity.
Show.
Yeah, it's got nudity, sex, blood, and it's got people who are written perfect. It has great actors. It has, like, some people who watch it said, like, oh, this is stupid writing. No one talks like that. It's ancient Rome. Even if this is not what they actually talk like in ancient Rome, everybody talks with the same kind of idiom, with the same kind of thing. So they've created a culture. And within it, like, again, there's plenty of blood, there's plenty of nudity, but if those things offend you, there's still, or even if they don't offend you, like, there is still a good story there. The existence of scantily clad women doesn't mean it's a bad game, and, the regulatory hot springs scene doesn't demoralize the entire story.
No, I agree with that. I mean, I loved Spartacus, and what was I going to say? I mean, there's a subplot where, in order to get more attention, they turned the thing into a whorehouse on the off days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so for 2 or 3 episodes, it just became more and more and more of a whorehouse. I'm like, not only is this fun to watch, but you get attached to these characters, and you get to feel
They're all
for
hitting
them.
rock bottom.
Yeah, like is this what it's come to? We had to buy Jupiter's cock, and the cock is like every five words in that thing. A
Yeah.
little ridiculous, but
Yeah.
at least in that, like, because the violence was tuned up and the nudity was tuned up, you do need to tune up the writing to sort of match that. It does need to be a little more fantastical, a little more exaggerated. Otherwise, if characters are having regular, calm conversations, it doesn't amplify the violence. It just makes the violence feel out of place to the writing.
Yeah. Your counsel is most fine and sound, my dear friend. I am glad once again to have you by my side. Like, you'd have sentences like that there, and everyone would be talking like that, and it was all very fun to watch. But yes, the point is that that is a fantastic example where the blood, the nudity, the things people like to point at and point at the ESRB. It's not ESRB. That's for games.
Man, I should know this. The TVA? I don't know it. I forgot.
I don't know.
The
point,
rating, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the point is, it's easy to look at that and say, here's a naked woman, here's a naked guy. There's a lot of naked men in that. I mean, for everybody keeps saying, like, it was, sexist and glorifying, like, there's more cock for breasts, definitely.
Okay, so
And I've just shoved up the rating of this episode.
I'm not entirely sure if what I'm about to say is correct, but I do want to at least offer a theory as to the sexualization of younger girls. I'm saying girls in this because it is mostly girls. I mean, there are cases of young boys, but not for what we're talking about. And I mean, everyone's attracted to different things. And for me, I've only had minimal, but at least a somewhat of a sexual life so far. Hasn't been spectacular, but it existed, and for that I'm thankful, whatever. But there's something to be said about being attracted to innocence. Because there is exploration, there's curiosity, there is the want to learn something, and there's something to being the more experienced one out of the two. And so when you're attracted to someone that is sexualized, meaning actively able to engage sexually and is aware sexually, but doesn't know anything about it, then that can be a reason why somebody might enjoy that. And I can totally see it taking precedence in Japanese culture because they can be much more afraid to break out of the norm and to have an open dialogue about these things. And so leave it to the animes, leave it to the games to be full force. We're gonna show this off because this is what's on the back of people's minds. I mean, it exists because there's reasons for it.
It is, like, that whole area is something very interesting to explore. I remember there actually is a book out called All Men Are Pedophiles, and that's sort of the blanket explanation for what you just said. But that's actually a pretty interesting theory, and just the whole existence of it. And I think it's just we've become really overprotective as we discover more and more things, like the idea that some people actually are, sexually attracted to younger women. Oh, therefore, all examples of young women in bathing suits are, pornography. Like, there actually was a time where you could take a picture of your kid having a bath, get it published, or not published, sorry, printed, because once upon a time you were able to do that yourself. And you'd have the police come over and basically ask if you're making child pornography. It's like, no, I'm taking a photograph of my own child in the bathtub.
Yeah, my parents have photos of me in the bath. And it's embarrassing, but I don't.
Yeah,
I don't want to indict my parents for it.
Yeah, and like, I think it's also, we briefly talked about the furry culture the other day, and it's a matter of furries were everywhere, and this was this really cool thing that we discover there's a group of people that are sexually attracted to it, and all of a sudden furries are basically the punching bag of the internet.
Yeah.
So it's sort of an uncomfortable thing for everybody, because it can't exist without somebody getting turned on by it, regrettably. It's kind of the why Rule 34 of the internet exists. It's, there's someone's gonna get turned on by the characters from My Little Pony going at it in full pony form. I'm not quite sure what to say to that, but because of that, ponies in general, or bronies, and people who like My Little Pony get ostracized because, oh, you're a guy, you like it, you're not the target audience. therefore you must be into it in a different way or an appropriate way. And I think sexuality in general is just a weird thing, and how it ties into everything. And a lot of people are angry at that, but it's really the fault of the advertisers and the game producers and the movie producers for shoving it down our throats every single moment of the day, because there's this whole idea that sexuality sells or sex sells, which it doesn't. It distracts. They teach you this in advertising school because it's based on psychology. So a lot of people get disturbed again by the over-sexualized young girls because someone out there is probably getting turned on by it. Therefore, it's lolly porn. Therefore, the whole thing is bad, and that's an incredibly horrid justification. And again, goes back to the furry thing.
It creates shame. It creates guilt, but it is not yet criminal.
Yeah.
So you don't need to criminalize people for that kind of thing. Just be like, listen, man, keep that to yourself because other people are even more uncomfortable with it than you are.
Yeah, on that whole topic, it's actually hilarious. I was having a similar conversation with somebody the other day, and when you say something just because you're trying to create shock value, or you want that person just to shut up by having their jaw drop. Well, it's like, yeah, once upon a time, I was turned on by 13-year-old girls. I was 14.
Okay. There was a Michael Jackson joke along those lines. May rest in peace, which was. Why did Michael Jackson date 24-year-olds?
Oh, yeah.
Because there was 20 of them. Get it? Because he's into little kids? Yeah. All right, so just to wrap this up, I would say if you're someone who hasn't played very many JRPGs, the ones that I would definitely recommend, obviously Bravely Default, but Chrono Trigger, I think is a great example of a game that just manages to design itself so brilliantly, and there's so much depth to it. Pretty much any of the Final Fantasies are worth checking out.
There's plenty of retro collections, and I even know Steam recently did Final Fantasy 3 in full 3D on it, and the requirements that's pretty low. So that's a pretty easy way to just wet your.
You'll probably like some Final Fantasies more than others because they do try different things in terms of gameplay. But you'll probably end up liking at least one or two of them. And we haven't even discussed the music. I mean, the music.
Oh God, the music
brilliant.
is pretty much always amazing. It's that seems to be something that the Japanese culture has always cared about more than the American one. I mean, recently they have started doing orchestras and that kind of stuff, but like Baton Kalas had a fantastic soundtrack, and it's amazing when you can make a battle music that consists of 2 violins and a wind instrument sound truly threatening to you, not overtly in your face, loud, but just this underlining tension going on. And I love that soundtrack. Just a lot of things I would like to add to that list. It's a little hard to find it at this point, but Skies of Acadia, I think that did a lot of what we were talking about very well. You start off in a rowboat, or it's an airship. It's all airships because where everyone's floating around the sky for whatever reason, it makes for easier design of the overworld. But you start off in that, you eventually work your way up to a better ship. You then work your way up to a really an awesome ship complete with particle laser, and then you get an upgrade for it that allows you to go above the one cloud layer or below the other cloud layer because the pressure lines are different. And the world keeps this one island, I can't get on it. I get this upgrade, I dive under. It's like, oh, it's not fully formed underneath it. I can actually dive up. It's like, oh, that's cool. I've been bumping into this thing all freaking game.
Nice.
And it was really fun like that. And the characters had definition. They had reasons to exist. And it was just a really fun world. And it wasn't afraid to blow up its own hometowns. That, it's a matter of you visit this location, and guess what? Plot happens, and now you can't go back to this location anymore.
So I'm just going to go pick up some milk. I'll be back.
All of a sudden, plot!
Yeah.
And that one, that was actually one of my favorite ones, because especially since they blew up some of the places, if you didn't collect this thing that does this thing, nope, sorry, consequence.
Yeah. Tales of Symphonia, the GameCube or whatever console it's available on now, in my opinion, the most fun that I've had in combat, because it wasn't turn-based, it was real-time, and you couldn't just run anywhere. You had to run on a straight line between you and your enemy, but when you switched to enemies, because the enemies all took up different spaces,
It's kind of like a 2D fighter, actually.
yeah, but the battles played out, the same way I would have pictured them playing out in my mind anyways, and so that's always a good sign.
I think Tales of Symphonia had the fantastic thing of you could have somebody come in and do co-op with you and attack people. So it was a story you were watching, but you had a reason to play it next to somebody else, and then a fight would break up, and the person who's watching and enjoying the story with you then picks up a controller and gets invested. I know there are people who will play a video game and have their boyfriend or girlfriend just sitting there watching them. I've never quite got that appeal. But again, with Tales of Symphonia, it's like this moment comes up, now you got a chance to join me. It's not, a forced cooperative experience where you've got Master Chief and this guy who looks curiously a lot like Master Chief, who only seems to ever appear when you've got a friend next to you.
Or that the random agent in Perfect Dark, the blonde one.
Or
who are you? What's your story?
Or even just going back to Gears of War, it's like you must always have somebody standing next to you because you must always have a co-op partner in the event of an emergency. But Tales did a fantastic, and there even were some points where you were just you on your own. So sorry, buddy, you can't pick up the controller for the next few fights.
Yeah. Oh, and you just made me think of Secret of Mana too. I mean, that game, whether you're playing it on your own or not, that game was just the three of you fighting right on the spot. So that was another great co-op game because somebody would take over, except that they had to wait for the first 2 or 3 hours until you got the second character. So yeah, I'm done. Are you done?
Yeah, I think we covered a decent amount, and I think it's, again, culturally, it's a different experience.
You're doing yourself a disservice by not experiencing it.
Exactly, and maybe it's not for you. But get out of your comfort zone a little. Maybe it is for you. I've always had a bit of a, I can't really explain why I like Jrpgs. It's just always this fun little different diversion to every other diversion I'm being placed with.
Yeah. All right. End episode.